Welcome back to the Momentum Sports Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Israel. Thank you for tuning in or listening in wherever that may be and whenever that may be. I think you'll enjoy today's show. Today, I'm joined by Warren Smith, who is one of the most accomplished builders in American soccer and professional sports here in the U.S. He has a career that spans 25 years. And to give you a little bit of a rundown of what he's accomplished to this point and what he's doing today, Warren is known for bringing AAA baseball to Sacramento and building Raley Field. He helped scale the Portland Timbers through their evolution into Major League Soccer. He went on to found Sacramento Republic FC, who won a championship in their first year. And now he's co-founding Ozarks United in Northwest Arkansas, which is what I think one of the more unique soccer projects in America today, and is one of the reasons that I wanted to have Warren on the show, in addition to the fantastic insights that he'll be able to provide from his incredible career. With that, let's jump right into it. Warren, thank you very much for joining me today. I've been looking forward to this podcast for some time now. I try to learn as much as possible, and I think you have one of the more unique lenses as it relates to professional sports ownership here in the U.S., and particularly kind of in that middle market of sports. Some of the teams you've been involved with and a part of, I guess you could say, are in the Big Five now today. One notably moving to the MLS. But appreciate you joining me. Welcome to the show. I got to ask you here out of the gate. We got a Super Bowl this weekend. Seattle and the Patriots. Who do you have? Who do you think is going to win the game this week?
Not really picking somebody. I just I'm really looking for a good game. Want to be entertained. But if I had to pick, I'd say Seattle, only because they're on the West Coast.
I agree. I think the championship game was probably the Super Bowl between the Rams and Seattle. So I'm right there with you. But you've got a fascinating background. It's going to take us a little while to get through it. But I wanted to start out kind of when you think back to when you entered sports, how did that come about? I think, it's very interesting, this asset class. There's a lot of new people in sports today, capital operators, you name it. And then others who have been in it for decades, like yourself. What was the impetus, the mechanism that brought you into, sports management and ownership?
It's a great question, Kyle, and thank you again for having me. But it was all by accident, Kyle. I was in technology sales when the cellular industry came out. Worked for McCaw Cellular. We were bought by AT&T. It just happened to be, working for a big corporation where my boss changed every 6 months. I was kind of just looking for something else to do, and had a good friend in a gentleman by the name of Kevin McClatchy, who tried to buy the Oakland A's and move them to Sacramento. He was unsuccessful, and then bought the Pittsburgh Pirates and moved to Pittsburgh, and that led to PNC Ballpark. But he gave me the question that changed my life, and asking and advocating for Sacramento for him not to give up. He gave me that question, and it was, why don't you do it? And I laughed because I didn't have that kind of money. I didn't know what the heck to do, but he put me in contact with some great people, the Heeman family, kind of a baseball royalty, and a chance meeting with Peter Uberoff, who kind of boiled it all down for a strategy for us, and then having the chance to meet Art Savage, who was my equity partner in the Sacramento Rivercats and Raley Field. Having the opportunity to learn from arguably the best person, the best operator in professional sports, to me, was really, really special. So not only did we get to learn the process, we actually learned to run the business, and it was really, really exciting. But that's how I got in.
Fascinating. I think that's very similar to a lot of the answers I typically get. Not necessarily planned as, part of somebody's career path per se, but taking advantage of unique opportunities and relationships and saying yes when something presents itself, even when there's a lot of ambiguity around what that ultimately may be.
That's right.
What in that first project, AAA baseball stadium, you mentioned, or club, you mentioned Raley Stadium, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. What was the core foundation of the organization when you joined? Were you establishing a club? Was it already there? Were they in a stadium that they owned and managed, or did you have to coordinate that? Can you walk us through kind of the very beginning of that element of the baseball club?
You bet. I was a Sacramentan, and I love Sacramento, and I really wanted to make a difference for the community. I was involved in the community in a lot of different ways, just not in this way. And but as you know, there are only a certain amount. There's only 30 franchises in minor league, and that's all levels, right? Single A, double A, triple A, because you have to have the same number up in major league so that the players, you have that the development agreement, right? So
Sure.
So we ended up, and there was no stadium. The Sacramento Solons were a team that played in the 50s, had a resurgence in the 60s, but it just a makeshift stadium, right? So, but we were the largest community in the country without professional baseball. And the numbers made a lot of sense. And it's a Sacramento, everybody knows, or at least maybe more than in Northern California, just how strong a baseball market it was. You had Dusty Baker, Jerry Manuel, a whole bunch of people that actually played in professional baseball. And it just meant, like, how do we actually make something happen? Well, in California, it's very difficult to finance stadiums and get public dollars, right? So we had to take a very unique approach. And before Art came in, Bob Heeman and I were able to sell the Raley Corporation, the Raley's family stores, to come on as a sponsor. And basically a number that we had never seen in minor league baseball. It was, 5 times as much as the average. And that led to, the ability to have some really good conversations, and it led to Art Savage. And then to really put a partnership together, a joint venture with a JPA, a Joint Powers Authority, that we developed, or that the city of West Sacramento, the county of Yolo, and the county of Sacramento kind of came together and helped us to finance this. So it was the first at the time 100% paid for privately, and then 100% publicly financed building. And here we are, it's 27 years into playing there, and the bonds are almost all paid off. So it was a massive success in how we structured it. And so much so that, the A's have decided to play in that facility here today, for the next couple of years until they actually move into Las Vegas. So really it was about kind of setting a vision on what we could ultimately accomplish, looking at all the challenges, and then getting people on board with the concepts of, doing something, for the community, but doing it in a big way, but protecting the community from a financial standpoint.
And was that an asset that the stadium in and of itself, was that controlled and managed by the team? Was that a city controlled or managed venue ultimately?
100% controlled by the club. Okay. We in the very beginning, we even controlled the concessions and things like that, and then learned that we could probably, as the honeymoon ended, that we should really focus on selling tickets and sponsorships. And so we got out of that business, but really everything, was controlled by the club.
What does that do for a sports organization? And we're going to get to what you're working on today, but there's still some unique other stops along the way that I think there's some valuable learnings from. But how meaningful was it for the franchise to have a stadium that was under your control from scheduling purposes, as a revenue mechanism? Like, what's the difference on a balance sheet? How significant is that, rather than being in a lease or having somebody else manage and have access to all those key revenue categories?
Well, obviously from a scheduling standpoint, it's critical, right? So we need to make a commitment to the league, and you can protect against that if you're a tenant, but having some flexibility too, because there's challenges that arrive during the season, right? So teams need to get back east because of storms or things of that nature. So you have some flexibility from a scheduling standpoint, but really it's about other events and how we drive other events. as the owner of the building, we can then negotiate with promoters, people that want to put on events. So we leased the facility to the community, and then obviously had a number of revenue drivers. We had, my favorite was we had the Dave Matthews Band. And so we had probably 6 or 7 concerts in those early years. We put on our own event, which was a music/fireworks, always on July the 3rd, because we're always made it so that we're on the road. We just had a number of events that we were able to put together to actually drive ancillary revenues to actually help us pay for the people that we wanted to actually have in the organization. So the organization, as an example, had 55 full-time employees, and all of our brethren in the league at the time had 16. They were doing, they were doing 4 to 5 million on average in revenue. And we were doing 25. So, I mean, it was a philosophy that Art had, and that I was able to learn, that ultimately it's about using people to drive revenues and being as creative as we can to get alternative revenues into the building. It's harder in baseball just because of the costs associated with, putting up a stage and whatnot. But outdoor, there wasn't an outdoor venue at the time for concerts. And so we were able to maximize, revenue during that period.
It worked really well. I mean, today, if you look up that club, it's arguably one of the best, most profitable, well-run clubs over the last 2 or 3 decades. So it's clear that the foundation that you set has been instrumental, and really doing that, I guess, the right way from the beginning was instrumental.
Real quick, I want to, because you said something that's important, but I was one of a team, man. It was really Art's leadership, and ultimately a team of people that really cared deeply about the community to make that happen. So, I get a lot of recognition for it, but at the same time, it's team effort.
As most great things in life tend to be. For sure. Quarterback always got a lot of the praise, and I was usually trying to redirect. And then when it was bad, I was unfortunately absorbing the brunt of it. I want to kind of fast forward here, to another project of yours that you were involved in, I'm sure as a part of a team related to the Portland Timbers. You guys were a part of kind of building a really unique type of asset there in Portland that ultimately made its way to the MLS in 2009. Can you take us back to your involvement there and just the general overall process of, that club had been established, if I'm correct, since like 1975, had played in various leagues along the way, ultimately kind of getting to the pinnacle of U.S. soccer. But what was your involvement there? What were some of the key learnings in seeing, a club go from, multiple leagues, instability along the way, to ultimately being a club that joined the MLS, 16, 17 years ago now?
Yeah, well, it was the opportunity that actually showed me what might be possible in Sacramento to start the Sacramento Republic Football Club. But so it again, life is a lot of accidents or clandestine, moments, right? And that was definitely the case. The Portland Beavers were a team in the Pacific Coast League that was in financial hardship and very close to bankruptcy. And so the league stepped in and basically needed to take it over. And the league asked us, because we're obviously doing so well financially, to kind of be the stewards of that. So Art agreed to that. And that was in 2004. And at the time, again, the facility there was more of a baseball stadium, but they played soccer in it. And honestly, there were so many conversations about closing the organization. Let me back up a little bit. So I was on the executive team that actually kind of managed the business, right? So and then we had a lot of people on the ground, and every now and then we get involved in some things on the ground. But ultimately, it was a strategy on how do we actually convert the baseball. And we knew everything about baseball, and they were just not spending money in the right places, and they didn't control their budgets, and frankly didn't have a really good sales and marketing strategy. So from a baseball perspective, we thought we could make a difference really quickly. Alan Ledford led that effort with kind of the operators and the team, and on the ground, we learned a ton, right? So, and this is where I kind of fell in love with the sport. What I fell in love with, I love sports. Everyone, in the United States generally does, and played college football, played one game of soccer, broke my leg, so I never was this huge soccer fan. But I loved. What I loved was the fact that you could hang around with these kind of younger people. They're 24 at the time, and I'm late 30s, and all they wanted to do is talk about this club that they wanted. They wanted their ways with. It was a demographic, the 18 to 34-year-old that was just saying, "Hey, I want to be involved." So what I love of what we were able to do is actually listen to people and talk to people and actually have conversations with people that ultimately helped us to learn, because we knew nothing about soccer. And I remember Art, not really thinking soccer was there yet, right? So we got in there with this desire to learn, because we had to keep it open because the city wanted that. The mayor, kind of mandated, he was not going to go for closing it. So, we just did our business, right? We kind of took the minor league or Art's approach to running the business and actually put it in place up there. Again, controlling costs. And Dan Visker, our CFO, was fantastic in being able to help, really kind of, bucket it and make sure we're not overflowing in buckets. And then ultimately, it led to some small successes in the very beginning. We had a beer night, $1 beer night, that I think was the first thing we did. And we had, pretty good surge of attendance. And long story, it was averaging 600. And just through what we were able to do, it just went from 600 to about 6,000 in attendance on average. They had this rivalry with the Portland Sounders, and, it was fantastic. So as we turned them around, it's time to, for the league to bring in a new partner to operate the team. And so 2007, we sold it to Merritt Paulson, the son of Hank Paulson. And he said he wanted to get to Major League Soccer at the time. And I remember Art laughing because there had not been a team that actually made a profit at that time in Major League Soccer. And it shows us how quickly the world changes, right? So Merritt bought into the league, I think, for a price of roughly $10 million. He's been one of the most successful franchises in the league. To their credit, they did a ton of really cool stuff, from a community relation standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, from really just a brand standpoint. And but it was our foundation that actually helped to lay that. In fact, we had a handful of employees that actually stayed up there, and one of which is still, just left the franchise just last year. So we learned a ton by, again, just solving problems, and I think that's kind of the overall summary of that.
The franchise as a whole stuck out to me, I guess, in the 2009, 10, 11, 12 timeframe because of the supporter base, the environment that was created within the stadium. I was like, man, that kind of looks like what I think European soccer looks like, just from almost, I don't know if the word's tenacity of the fan base,
sure.
But engagement of the fan base. So you get exposed to soccer, you transition from baseball to soccer. I think this is, probably 10 years or so, maybe 6 years or so after the Women's World Cup here, where soccer really kind of took center stage. We all remember Miss Chastain's famous goal and kind of ripping the jersey off. And I even remember as a middle schooler that brought a lot of attention and focus to the game of soccer. You are involved in Portland, and as you alluded to earlier, then there's this, kind of maybe core foundation mentally about the game, which ultimately leads to Sac Republic. And for those that don't know, Sacramento Republic has been mainstay, one of the best clubs in the USL since they've been in the league. Why don't you take us through how that opportunity arose? Because there's these interesting kind of threads here to pull on each opportunity. But how did Sacramento Republic come about? You founded that team. what was the impetus? What was the push to do so? And what were maybe some of the early learnings as you see another wave of expansion franchises within the USL, that still last today? What were some of those core learnings early on?
Yeah. So first I was co-founder, and the other co-founder is a gentleman by the Joe Wagner. Joe Wagner was on our staff at the River Cats, marketing guy that just probably brilliant in marketing, but very, very, very kind of, he pushes the envelope. Let me just say that. We had a man eating chicken, kind of thing, and he actually showed a man actually eating chicken, and everyone thought it would be the same. Kind of shows you a little bit of his mindset, but he wanted to, he felt, he really wanted, he loved Sacramento like me and wanted to make a difference. He came to me with some ideas. And at the time it was the NASL and USL, and USL had just gone through an acquisition. We actually started talking to them both about the possibility of this, but really, and made a decision on the USL just because they were a lot more attentive and a lot more, interested in us, right? And interested in our community. And the reason I got involved, again, I love Sacramento, wanted to make a difference, wanted to make it. Yeah. And I happened to do a clean tech startup in 2008, sold it in 11. And during 12, the Sacramento Kings were very likely moving to Seattle. And the mayor, Johnson, asked me to help come up with some different ideas on what we might be able to do to keep that from happening. And obviously talked to the A's with them about Sacramento, talked to the Raiders, and both of which would probably have moved if we could have financed a building for them, 100%. But we just in our community really couldn't afford that. So I just came back to them and said, I've got an idea that worked for us elsewhere. I'm going to come back and start this club and build something from scratch instead of taking something from somebody else, right? But let's build something that's authentic to our community and then really make it special. And which just happened to be that soccer platform in Sacramento is pretty extensive. You had 130,000 people that actually played the sport, registered under the federation at that time. So you had a strong foundation. He had an indoor team that was very successful. The Sacramento Knights, ironically coming back in a couple of years, but they were averaging 5,700 in attendance, and then just all of our, studying the market, it just made a lot of sense and people really cared. The other thing I'd say is we're also timing really helped us to be a lot more successful than we might have been. The community learned they had a voice, man. They all said, Kevin Johnson came out and said, "I need help, man. I need help." And so we got corporate help. We got help from the people. And so we all learned to kind of step up and say, hey, we want better for our community. And so we were just able to, kind of roll on the back heels of that right before the state, their Golden One Arena was finalized to keep the Kings. We kind of rolled out the brand again, getting a little bit lucky. And then the community just kind of said, okay, we're done with one project. Let's move to this next. That's an oversimplification, but it's really kind of what happened. And the other thing is we listened to our customers. We were going to start a franchise playing at a stadium called Hughes Stadium, which was built, a WBA project in the 30s that is on a gorgeous facility, by the way, but it's on the campus of Sacramento City College, had a track around it, had turf, and had lines. And so I was talking to our fan base, and they said, they didn't know what our plans were yet. We hadn't announced anything yet. And they said, whatever you do, don't play on a facility that has a track around it, has synthetic surface, and has football lines on it. So I had to come up with a solution, right? So, and to be true to the sport, it just, again, good partners in what is Comcast Spectacor now. Comcast had a facility that they were operating at the Cal Expo, providing the food service and entertaining. And they had an investment they needed to make as part of meeting their requirements. And so they approached us with this concept of doing this, what led to Raley Field. And now I think it's Sutter Health, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but there's another name of it. But ultimately, it led to us creating a facility. It was very makeshift. It was very much modular. It was very much portable in nature. We had to work with the state to actually make it permanent. It was very difficult, but it led to just this great venue to come. Even though it was makeshift, people made it feel like their own, and it was right on top of so we did a couple things right. So the inlines were right on, and the stands were elevated enough to where they could actually have a little bit of space, but so you're right on the game. We had great success in year one with 8,000, sold out every match at 8,000. So and then we started talking to Major League Soccer, who said, man, it's important that you expand these facilities, get more season tickets. So we did. And that was, one of my mistakes is that we just grew too fast, 11,500, just from a financial perspective, because that was all cash that we had to pay for that. And then,
did you win a championship in the first year?
We did, yeah. So that was, again, God at work. It feels like I'm a man of faith, and it feels like he was at work on Sacramento. And it was really, we shouldn't have won that semifinal match against LA Galaxy. We were down 2-0 late in the game, and two goals by our best player, Roro, who just retired from there last year. And then, a shot right before overtime, or right before the end of the time, that ultimately led to the victory. Yeah, so we were just blessed, and we won the next match handily. So, yeah, but really kind of taking advantage of the world as it comes to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. We'll get into what's on your plate today here in a little bit, but I wanted to kind of pause there for a second. As you look at the USL today, if you just focus on that, but you could layer in MLS Next Pro and some of the initiatives at that level. There are going to be an incredible amount of expansion teams here, rolling out over the next handful of years. If somebody asked you today to start a new club, which you have, but from scratch, like, what are the non-negotiables really early on that would have to be in place, or that you would focus on in getting a franchise or organization kind of from 0 to 1, much less stadium and all of those elements, but just getting the infrastructure in place post, let's say, acquiring the franchise from the league? Like, what are some of those core things that come to mind that are salient, that are no-brainers, got to do this the right way?
Well, I'm going to differentiate myself from other people, if I may, real quickly, because
Sure.
I think that there are some markets that are being pursued, because you have people that love those communities that, and, at different levels, in our league, as we have this new, what do we call it? Premier League, and then Championship, and then we're going to pro-rel. It's like, I'm not sure there's the right fits that's kind of happening, right? There's a lot of kind of hope, I think, but for me, it's like, I need to be in a market that there's a good foundation. San Diego obviously had a very strong foundation. Sacramento had a very strong foundation. Well, Arkansas doesn't. The lack of competition and its growth rate actually overcomes that. So I would also say that it has to be a market that actually is realizing some success and having some growth and having some have very good foundations in place as a community themselves, and not one that is actually, kind of flat or dying. Because, while those can help, and I'd love to be a project to help, it's a lot more heavy lifting. Everything is heavy in what we're doing. So you add some more weight to it, you might not be able to pick up the weights, if that makes sense. So, so for me, it's that foundation. 2, how we finance the building, either public financing, right? If we can get it, and most communities are not able to do that today. So how do we do that? We augment that with real estate development opportunities, right? So for 2 reasons. 1, we want to make sure that our investors have the best return they can. And number 2, to mitigate the risk associated with the stadium, right? So I was involved in a club consulting for them that actually is gonna have a $120 million publicly financed building, plus 40 acres plus to develop. They're now in a perfect position because they have the best of both worlds, public financing and the ability to develop, right?
Yeah.
So, and every community needs these entertainment districts. I mean, even it used to be just the major leagues, and it was done in a macro way. Maybe I'm getting off topic here, but
no, this is good.
So from a macro standpoint, like cities have been doing this entertainment entertainment zone development for a long time, right? Coors Field, it was built in Lodo. It was really the first building in a warehouse district. And look at Lodo now, right? You're actually entertained around that event, and you can be entertained not even having to go to that event. In Sacramento, Golden One Stadium, right? Put in the core of downtown. Here in San Diego, oh my gosh. Johnny Moore's, the city, he wanted to move downtown. The city said, we'll help you to move downtown, but if you're going to want us to help finance a building, you got to actually develop some properties. And if you look at Petco Park area today versus what it was, there was nothing. And so it led to an economic development for that city. And now he benefited from that, and so did the city, but it ultimately paid for the building, right? So wherever we go, we try to do that, but also improve, the returns for the investors.
Yeah, critical. And obviously at Momentous, that's our entire thesis and a lot of our discussion, which is what's made Ozarks United very, very interesting for us there in Northwest Arkansas. I want to ask one more question before we get to Ozarks, because I think that project is extremely interesting and we're excited about it. But outside of the venue and the mixed use real estate, as it relates to an expansion club, one of my roles within our organization is the underwriting of the human beings operating these sports entities. So how do you think about selecting or finding, that human talent, whether that's the CEO, the general manager? I think one of the interesting things here in the middle market of sports is, sometimes that may be an individual that doesn't have, 10, 15 years operating a sports organization, right? Ultimately, It is a business. But, what I found is, as you look at the USL level, it's kind of like the players. They're looking to get to the next level in many cases. And so does the human capital talent managing these organizations. I'm sure you've dealt with plenty of that type of turnover over time. So you've got to have a framework and system in place that can persist even when there's, management changes. But what are some of the key things you're looking as it relates to those humans that are waking up every day and building the foundation of a sports organization?
Kyle, that's the first time somebody has asked that question to me in this kind of setting or format. And I just, I appreciate it too. It's so key, right? So, but the way that we, it's hiring the way that you hire, right? Take your time, make sure you're finding people that actually fit the dynamics of the organization, fit the personalities of the organization, and that can help create that foundation of operating, right? So that very first president, that very first role is so important to us to actually bring in. It's got to be somebody that can sell, right? Because we're always selling, but it's also got to be somebody that can, that we can kind of put next, that can lead people, right? So, and that people want to follow. The biggest miss in people like that is the financial stuff. So how do we mitigate against that, right? So that's why Forrest Eber and I are so connected and so important. His skill set and making sure that we set this up right, his ability to actually teach and ultimately help the organization perform financially, just right. How, what are the right bucket amounts, right? So just, I hate to be that simple, right? But making sure that we're in range of what makes sense, right? Helping those people then understand and teach them, right? So, but number one, you generally know it. So, good example, right? So, the year 2000, we're opening up the Sacramento River Cats. In 1999, we hired a gentleman by the name of Tom Glick. So, Tom was like the most dynamic person that you could ever be around. He just makes you smile, right? But he was just a hustler, but also could sell and just very polished. Well, he left us and went to help form Teambo at the NBA, went on to be the commercial officer for Man City, became the CEO of and president of the Panthers in North Carolina, and then became the CEO of Chelsea, right? So maybe the last one might have been reversed. I can't remember, but so here's a guy that actually really understood the sales and marketing approach. So that's what we're ultimately looking for: the people that actually can feel very comfortable in the space of others, that where they're not afraid to actually lead and ask and build and so those are skill sets that are not hard to see if people actually have. Okay.
Right.
And then also hire in a way that ultimately you got some time to try things out versus, making and sometimes you gotta like hustle and yeah, here's this right one, and then we're competing, for that person, right? So sometimes we have to rush it, and sometimes we make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if we can take our time, and then most of them are either number ones that are looking to a bigger market, number twos that are looking for their shot, other sports where they actually may want to try something new, and then other examples, people that have actually grew up in the market and that are actually, at a high level in the sport or in sports elsewhere. So there's no one solution. It just takes a lot of hard work and then ultimately, partnering with the right people to actually help us find those people. And most of the time they're out there, right? Most of the time they're out there, and then do the same with that person that's in place, so that the people that they're bringing in are people that they can actually lead those different departments. As much as you want to start advertising, outsource it, right? As much as you want to start kind of selling, outsource it, right? So we're currently outsourcing with an organization called Platform Consulting, which is Jamie Guin, who's the former Legends, West Coast, led the Legends in the West Coast. And, we're having to just, can't really say the organization, so it's not documented yet, but we have just an unbelievable conversation going on with a kit sponsor right now. So outsource, then bring in take your time, bring in the right people.
I have to double click on one thing that you said there a handful of times, and in the last 30 minutes, an individual that can sell. So what does that actually mean to you? Is that an ability to sell a community or a public entity, the city, the mayor, on a vision, combined with, finding out to go out and touch the people that are ultimately going to be your fans and supporters and sell the vision to them, sell the vision to a coach? Like, is it just selling across the board to the multiple stakeholders that you've got to all get rowing in one direction? Is that what you're alluding to, and kind of in being able to sell there?
Yeah, it's literally the ability to have somebody to have empathy, that understands the people that they're interacting with or dealing with, that can help them accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, right? So how we do community, right? Erica Bjork, our VP of market, everything outwardly facing with the Sacramento Republic Football Club. She wasn't a salesperson, but she could sell anything, right? And the reason she was able to is because she was very involved with the community. She had built a lot of trust, and then she just had, if somebody had an idea and it was in line with some of the strategic initiatives we're trying to do, she could actually take that idea and run with it and make it gold. Example, right? We wanted the foundation in soccer. Well, we agreed to actually start a partnership with Street Soccer USA. It led to us developing a park with them, but she was really the kind of granted, we made the decision, there was a mutual decision, but she led that effort and still continues even after leaving with the club with that organization, because of the trust that she built and loves the organization, right? So people that can have empathy. I think there's a misnomer in selling that those are just people that are just trying to get somebody to buy something. Actually, I think it's different. It's helping other people solve problems. But ultimately, how do we, solve our own problems while we're helping solve the problems? We may not solve our problem today, but we may set up our, ability to solve that problem in the future, if that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah, such a relationship business,
100%.
top to bottom at the end of the day, right?
Real quickly with you. So and so it's not just relationships and community but fans. I mean, you have to grow relationships with tens of thousands of people, make them feel like that they're a part of the club. Again, listen and do your best to actually respond.
I think that is a trend that I hear all the time. For example, last week I did a podcast with a gentleman named Stephen Young of FC Cincinnati, and he talked about their chairman, Jeff, and like what the beginning of the foundation of that organization looked like. And he was out in the community just listening to the residents. Like, you're a steward of this really unique living, breathing organism in a sports franchise. And I think I continue to hear the groups that have done it successfully have really, really leaned in to ensure that the local community's voice is heard and a part of the kind of framing and foundation of the business, which for me seems so common sense, but I don't know that everybody always takes that path ultimately.
Well, Jeff's a great example, right? So he's a former city council member. He was on worked for the football team. And when they decided to come into the USL, he came out into Sacramento and ultimately, asked 1,000 questions, right? And then we have this thing in our league, and it's probably the same with MLS, and because we're all trying to grow the sport. In fact, I know it is because we actually all help each other, kind of in essence. But we have this kind of, nobody's hiding anything close. We're actually just kind of helping each other. And what he did there is, fantastic. Granted, he had an owner that was, willing to and able to take them, at that level, which we were not in Sacramento, right? So they got there quicker in Sacramento. In fact, I don't even know that they're going to get there even after receiving the award in 2018. But, Jeff's a great example of what you might be able to find. And sometimes it's somebody not in sports, Kyle. Sometimes it's somebody that understands community, and
that can be the most important piece. So that brings us to our next topic. Obviously, how you and I met around Ozarks United, a club that you've founded, co-founded, are establishing there in Northwest Arkansas. A ton of unique elements to that opportunity. But why don't you give us some background? How did you land on establishing another club, that being in Northwest Arkansas and in the USL?
Well, the reason I got involved, twofold. One, I was doing some consulting. Decided I learned I wasn't a consultant, and then then I had this. The league asked me to help in some markets. So one was New Orleans. The second one was here. And the reason I was interested in this is I've been coming to Northwest Arkansas since 1990. My grandmother moved from Kansas City to here, or to Arkansas. I'm now currently in San Diego, but she. So we had made that trip once a year, and it seemed like there may have been 300,000 people in the area. It was definitely back country. You didn't have a freeway. Everything were county roads. But, making that trip every year, I got to see this little community punch above its weight class and continue to build these amazing projects that everyone said that they couldn't do, and yet they're doing it and doing it so successfully, right? So now the core foundation here is all because of the Fortune 500 companies and a Fortune 1 company that's there, right? And not to mention a private company that would be in probably the Fortune 500 if they were public. And there's today 15,000 open jobs. So I was familiar with this community, and I watched them grow. I was never really an active participant. I'd come in and say, "Oh, that's interesting," and go check it out. And then, they built that beautiful museum that it's like, amazing, right? So, as an example, and It just happened to be that there's a gentleman that was moved here, Chris Martinovich, who you've met, who played in this league back in the early 2000s and wanted to do something for the community. And so the president at the time, Jake Edwards, introduced the two of us. And, at the time I was deep in San Diego Loyal, so I couldn't really help him, but I was happy to advise him. And after COVID and after leaving the Loyal, we regained and reconnected. And then, the league asked me to step in a little bit further, and it made sense to do it. And frankly, I'm glad I did, because again, it's an unbelievable community that the rest of the country doesn't really understand yet. So when I used to fly there, I used to have to tell people where I'm going. You have those conversations in airports and say in Northwest Arkansas, and I always get that, where's that? And then it became, where Walmart is headquartered. But now, the biking capital of the world, the outdoor biking capital of the world. What do you call that? Anyways, it's just it's been doing this, right? Secondly, the core foundation numbers, right? If you look at the people that live there today, they're adding over 50 people a day at this point. When I first started, it was 38. So you can see that rapid growth, right? But that population that's there today, 60% of them are not from that area. They've grown up from around the world, and they're coming here to serve. Ironically, many of them actually get reassigned to the company, and a lot of them never leave. So the lifestyle that they've been able to enjoy there is phenomenal. Number one, it's it's not that expensive, right? It's generally below every other market especially from a housing perspective. Now it's growing and it's getting more expensive for them, but it pales in comparison, what I'm paying here and what you're probably paying in Florida, right? So,
yep.
And then also the growth of the Hispanic community there. I mean, they're just the Hispanic and the Marshallese, right? So the Marshall Islands, were, after the settlement associated with the bombings practice from World War II, they had, a lot of people that they could move to the United States under the Immigration Acts, and ultimately one of the companies there, Tyson Chicken, really took advantage of that, right? So you have this massive, the second largest Marshallese community outside of the Marshall Islands that actually live there, and, again, huge soccer fans. But I'd really say it's that it's the fact that it's a very young community that is above average wealth and growing at such a rate that made a lot of sense. And they keep comparing themselves as, and I agree with this, by the way. I just hope it happens differently, but nothing against Austin, Texas, but they keep saying they're going to be like Austin, Texas. And I say, well, you want to be more like Northwest Arkansas. You're just kind of growing at that rate, right? So,
got it.
And then as we started to talk, there's only one other professional sports team, and that is the Naturals, AA baseball team. Decent enough organization, do a pretty good job, but they're not that involved in the community. And then you have the university sports programs, right? So the irony here is what used to be a huge Arkansas backing community is now somewhat of an Arkansas backing community, because again, most of the population's from around the world and follow their sports teams and whatnot. So and then it just became, as we started to look into the numbers, is okay, where do we go? First, if you're familiar with the area, there's that the stadium, Arvis Park in Springdale. No disrespect to the people that made the decision to put it there at the time, because Highway 49 had not been built yet. It was planned, but they put it in what is still today kind of, it's growing quickly now, but it was kind of like farmland, right? So there's been some medical parks that have come up, and there's been a couple apartments, but it's pretty much still on its own and it needs to thrive on its own. So looking for locations, I told Chris, I can't really get involved unless I know we can make it successful. So location. So we were able to find a piece of property in what is the living room of Northwest Arkansas, called Pinnacle Hills. It says you're coming up 49, heading towards Bentonville. You get right to Rogers. There's this curve in the freeway where all of a sudden you come up and it opens up, and you've got an Embassy Suites. It's probably 17 stories. You got a Top Golf to your left. You have the mall that everyone uses in the region. You have the amphitheater, and then you have these really good restaurant scene that has been popping up. Used to be just change, and now you're getting actually a huge growth in their own cuisine, if you will. Wright's Barbecue, one of the best barbecues I've ever had. So, and so we were able to find a location, but again, back to financing. Our state doesn't even, they don't know how to finance public finance. Very conservative state. They don't even have tools in place right now. They don't have economic development tools. So how do we first started to do this, as you know, is about a development to actually help pay for the stadium. So we needed the acreage. We're fortunate enough to work with Steve Lane and Colliers in that market to actually assemble 8 different properties, property owners, and have options to purchase all those, and are now kind of in a dialogue with a national developer to actually deliver, a campus for us, a mixed use campus of roughly 880 apartments and somewhere between 100 and 200,000 potential square feet of retail. If we get those numbers, we'll have to do less on apartments, but we're trying to see what we can do to actually help drive some more sales tax for the region with our partners and make more money for the local community. So. But it was all about kind of watching people grow and knowing what they're going to want and need. And then as we started to talk to them, learning that we were right and that the core numbers actually were very strong. So, the league liked it. They obviously competition in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. I like the fact that you've got basically a 3-hour drive to each of those. Would have been great to keep Memphis in Memphis. It's too bad it moved to Santa Barbara, but we've got really good foundational numbers in that community, and the community love us. We've now got 11,000 or almost 11,000. Excuse me. We just passed 10,000 on the supporters. People that are interested in tickets and whatnot. So. We've got a really good, strong foundation, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction. And looking forward to, finalizing everything at the end of this year.
Would you be able to pursue this opportunity if the acreage available or the land opportunity available was just enough for a stadium? Or, is that something that you feel like you could have pulled off? Or does it not make sense if there's not, kind of ancillary real estate opportunities to ensure that, investors get diverse exposure, not only on just the club, but, on the real estate around it? Like, do you really need the mixed use? And obviously I'm leaning into our thesis a bit here as it relates to the venue and then the mixed use around it. But I'm just curious if, would you have done it if it was just a stadium, or did it need the mixed use component?
Well, we started with just trying to do a stadium. And that's while I was doing the consulting for that other club that ultimately I saw was experiencing, just what the city wanted, right? City wanted more land, and they would provide more assets, more tools to finance a building if they were able to have that development. And again, now it's 40 acres and they're, building the facility. We weren't going to get there in Arkansas, but we looked at 15 acres originally, right behind the mall. The Hunt family controlled, great relationship with them, and ultimately tried to make it work, but we couldn't make the numbers work. So we ended up moving across the street. Fortunately, there was land that could be assembled, and we currently have 38 acres, and we're in the process of trying to get an additional 9. That would get us really close to almost 50 acres. And we can make the 38 work. It's the other 2 that actually make it even, how should I say that? a little bit more dynamic of a project, right? So,
Got it.
so we're just, I don't think we would have been able to make it work unless you had, a philanthropic type owner that really wanted to do something for the community. And
Yeah.
that was our first
Endless
approach.
balance sheet.
Right. That's right.
Awesome. Well, we thank you for the time. We've been on here for nearly an hour now. I want to kind of wrap up with some quick hitting thoughts, and then
Sure.
make sure that people know how to reach out to you all as it relates to Ozarks. But you've seen a lot of evolution, both in soccer domestically, as a sport and the growth of it. The USL, you've watched the MLS kind of emerge and grow to where it is today. I'm just curious of your takeaway when you sit back and you look at building Ozarks and that being within the USL. Today there's multiple levels within the league. I don't think the USL is trying to compete with the MLS, in my opinion, but really do something different around soccer as it relates to the structure, closer to the European model. But where do you think it's going? A lot of people will point to, hey, the World Cup is coming in 2026. There's going to be another kind of focus amongst the U.S. population on the sport. You're going to see the Olympics come in 2028. There'll be another kind of support of soccer for the U.S. team, both on the men's and women's side. You've seen women's football and soccer just explode. Atlanta recently, buying a franchise in the NWSL for $160 million for the franchise fee alone. So maybe what are some salient thoughts generally around where soccer is going? Have you been surprised by kind of this rapid growth and intensification from a value perspective of the women's game? How does Ozarks think about the women's side in the future potentially? Any anecdotal kind of take there perspective, I think, is unique coming from you about the growth of soccer generally the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, listen, I think it's really fascinating, right? It's the only sport that really has a truly true international competition. Yeah, rugby does as well. That's not fair, but I mean, when we talk about World Cup, we know that we're actually going to have, what do we have in 64 teams this year or 48 teams? I can't remember. It's
64.
Yeah, so it's
I think it's
just
64.
crazy, right? And the World Baseball Classics, started to do some of that, and it's great. But yeah, there's something special about uniting behind a country, and to come together that one time a year. I remember being in New York in 2006, walking Little Italy, and literally Italy is playing somebody, and that I can't remember who it was. But they were both European teams, and you had both of these crowds that were just like, all Americans, but all just like rooting for their teams. And then when we started to get better, actually we started to compete like this last year. It was just last World Cup is amazing, even though we might have done better. It was really amazing to see those people really get engaged and involved. So we have this growth of the sport, which is cool, but I think it's the competitions. That's why I love what the USL is doing. I love the fact that we're actually going to make a true united soccer system, meaning you're judged on the merit. And so as owners, it's our job. It's if we're going to be representing the community, to actually compete. And actually, instead of the American way, let's buy our way in and protect it, right? And I love that. And I like you said, we're not competing with Major League Soccer, and I don't think they're trying to compete with us. We're just trying to be unique and provide communities. And we just happen to be in markets, say 30, 32 through 100, right? So as far as market size.
Right.
And now we have a strong League One, as you know. That's not. I mean, literally, I think there's 14 teams in the league, but I think there's 3 or 4 coming in next year. But beyond that, there's at least another 10 in the next few years, right? So, not to mention some clubs that are come in right at the premier level. I'm involved with one of those, and so it's pretty cool, right? And actually, so for once, we're in the sport. We're actually going to have. We can actually compete, and
Yep.
then and the other thing I like on the women's side, because we're Division One, and maybe I don't know if this is going to be the case for men's, but if we win in Division One, we actually can play in international cups, club championships, right? So
Yep.
Copa America type stuff, right? So that's how you build a fan base. That's how you get people even more excited. You kind of get the true soccer fans. Don't get me wrong. You put a stadium in a good location that ultimately they are being entertained, and they say, "Hey, what are those people doing?" And they come in, and once they come, we have them, right? We may not get them every game, but we may get them 3 or 4 times a year. And then you throw these international competitions on top of them. Then you actually have something that is really helping you to kind of maximize your opportunity as far as a fan base and growing something. So I think I'm fascinated by what's happening, and I'm grateful. And I think we've all been kind of underestimated this, the World Cup in 1996, as you know, kind of was the explosion. Now we didn't see much right off the bat, but what we did see was tremendous growth every year, 10 to 15% every year from a player participation, from a ticket selling perspective, and a revenue. Right now here we are, and I think we're going to see 20+% greater this year.
I mean, it's an exciting time to be in the sport. There's no doubt about it. I'm excited to be in it. We're excited to be in it. I think, with our lean on the real estate and infrastructure side, soccer is a place where that is a priority. It's a priority at the USL level, which is, exciting to know that those expectations are kind of out there domestically when you establish a franchise that you're working towards, whatever size it may be. Some type of permanent stadium venue is the home of your club. Maybe I'll just ask one other question here, as it relates to pro-rel. And I think about this quite often. Obviously, I've looked at a number of deals across Europe, and there are USL owners who have exposure to being on cap tables in leagues that have pro-rel and may have a strategy that they're thinking about. But maybe a two-part question here. Do you think that in a pro-rel system, does that reward the best operator, or the most capitalized organization? So are you more successful in pro-rel because you have a better operator than others, or because you have a larger balance sheet than others? I think in Europe, many would argue that it's the balance sheet, especially as you get into Division One and the Championship in England. And then in addition to that, does that change how owners think about infrastructure, right? Capacity, the infrastructure providing more revenue streams for the holding company to ultimately spend more perhaps on the roster. I may be answering this myself, but I'm constantly thinking about this as we underwrite and process opportunities, try to see around the corner from a pro-rel perspective. Are we identifying operators or the best financial situation? And how does that affect the infrastructure? I'm just curious if you have any general thoughts around those kind of key pieces.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. First of all, again, I want to just hats off to the league for making this decision, right? I love the people in the league, Alec and Justin and Paul, and all the work that they're doing. It's just it's so cool that we're going on this approach. But also, to answer your question, I don't think it's either. I think it's culture. I think both of those play into it, but I think it's ultimately the culture that you can build as an organization. How the front office, the business side works with the sporting side, how the sporting side works with the business side. Very, very important. And there have been some successes. I don't want to mention names, but there's, people in our league that actually do really good job at culture, and some that maybe not so as good, and the results are showing, right? So I think it's one, developing an organization that's very clear vision and mission, and that all the employees and the people on the sporting side can point to when they're making decisions, right? So let's kind of make sure that everybody's educated enough on where we're going, what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and ultimately they can point to things so that they can make decisions and ultimately drive the organization in the right direction. But also have an open conversation and trusting enough that we can actually talk about where we're not hitting the mark, right? where we could do better, where each of us could do better, where the CEO or the president could do better, right? We have to, and then I'd say add to that, we have to build a bench, right? So we can't just rely on the number one players, right? We have to have a bench that can support those and that can ultimately move in when the player goes down, or when the salesperson leaves the organization. We can step somebody up into that, right? So building a bench, and then, but resources help, right? So we have to do everything we can to make a profit, ideally break even, right? It gets harder to do those type of things when the culture, hard to affect the culture when you're not having the resources to affect the culture.
Yeah.
So I just, for me at least, I think those are the key things I focus on. I think kind of, there's so much that I did wrong in the Sac Republic and could have done differently. But I learned from that, and I'm trying to put them in place now. Right. So, anyways, I just, again, resources help, but and by the way, we won, in our league, the average, we were half of a salary base as the rest of the league in 2014. Times were different. I get it. Right. But do we actually spend our way to success? I want to actually make sure that we actually spend our way to accomplish what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. And if it means that the culture deserves being rewarded, then we are rewarded.
I love that. I think culture is absolutely the right answer there. Often overlooked. Those that do it right, you can tell. To your point, you can see who have established great cultures in sports generally, but in particular in the USL. Listen, this has been a fantastic hour and 7 minutes. I really appreciate kind of your perspective, what you've built in the past, what you're building in the future. Is it, if somebody's out there that's an investor or interested in participating, as a partner in Ozarks, is that something that people can reach out to you all about? I'm obviously going to share, some of the core contact information for the club and how to get in touch. But is that something you guys are open to entertaining and discussing right now as partners? Okay.
As fantastic. Where we are with our cap table and what we're doing, we have a pretty significant initiative that we don't talk about publicly, right? But we believe that will jumpstart everything for us, and we want the capital to come in. So right now, as we're just circling and making sure that we're asking questions, helping people understand. And actually, frankly, we're doing really well on it. We're doing really well on the limiteds, and we now have a couple conversations going from a principal standpoint. So,
awesome.
Yeah. So the best way is to either reach out to me via email, warrensmithusl@gmail.com, or my phone number is 916-849-4718, or the website. We take inquiries as well, and that's ozarksunited.com.
Awesome. Well, listen, it's been an educational hour. I appreciate your candor and perspective, and ultimately, all of us that are participating, and that includes the audience, whether it's in various clubs or in various service provider ways, we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. I think as an asset class of sports. And then as you start to distill down into various leagues and clubs, it's, very much a team effort, both internally and league wide. So at a very minimum, we're excited to be in the same league as you all, and look forward to continuing the dialogue around Ozarks, and appreciate the time today.
Yeah, and thank you, because everyone wants to play in the major leagues, right? But there's a lot of value that are down below, right? And often overlooked, and it's still great communities. But when you do that, you actually help us all get better, right? So as an asset class, we're getting better. Operators are getting better. If you look at where we are as a league today versus where we were in 2013, I came into the room and there was only 2 other people that knew what valuations were. back then. So anyway, times have changed, and but listen, I look forward to continuing the relationship no matter where it goes, and thank you for letting me be a part of today.
Thanks for joining us. All right, enjoy the Super Bowl. We'll talk to you all soon.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Warren, for joining us today. I know that I learned a lot. I appreciate the candor, the perspective, and I hope that our audience also found this not only entertaining, but insightful as well.